Hello class and welcome to chapter 1. In this lecture we're going to be talking about organizational productivity and how HR supports that. So let's get started. Throughout this chapter you're going to notice that we're going to talk about the evolution of HR, specifically how traditional HR is evolving into strategic HR management. And what we mean by that is there's a trend right now for HR to show itself to be more strategically valuable to organizations, so that the other department leaders in marketing and IT, finance, etc. recognize the strategic value that HR can bring, as opposed to HR just being a cost center. So much expenses lies with HR, with paying employees, paying benefits, the potential for lawsuits, etc., etc. In this section here, we're going to talk about how HR actually ties into organizational productivity. For example, HR is directly responsible in part, but it contributes significantly to organizational costs, looking at the pressures that are associated with those costs, employee costs in particular, and figuring out ways that can be restructured to make those costs lower, to better utilize employees throughout the organization. Economics and job changes. HR has to constantly keep an eye on the economy and what's going on in the economy and how that affects hiring. For example, in an economy where there's very low unemployment, then you're going to pay a lot more money to hire new people. Where there's a high unemployment, then you'll be able to pay people a lower salary. You also have to keep an eye on the global consideration. Countries are becoming more and more global. Organizations are likewise having to respond to become more and more global. No longer are many organizations serving just the people within their local geographical area, but they're selling their products to people abroad. And you have to also have people in your company who understand those cultures, who understand the wants and needs of the client base that's truly diverse. Speaking of diversity, within America, diversity continues to grow. Right now, it's predicted by the year 2050 that minorities will be the majority in America. So we have to look at what implications does this have for organizations from an HR perspective: hiring, working, changing consumer preferences, certain consumer groups becoming larger and having more economic power, and how do we service those particular groups. Now, let's take a closer look at some of these things. So restructuring an organization, if you've ever worked for a large Fortune 500 company, you're going to see they go through major organizational restructuring pretty much once every couple of years. And it could be just a departmental restructure, or it could be an entire organizational restructure. But the question that you have to ask yourself is, do we have the right people in the right place? Do we have the right jobs focusing on the right tasks? Do we have too many employees? Do we not have enough employees? If we're going to if we're going to purchase or merge with another organization, how are we going to handle it from employee perspectives? You have to look at redesigning workloads. HR works very closely with hiring managers to properly define and assess what jobs people should be doing, what technology should be used to support those jobs. More and more commonly now, organizations are finding that they could save costs and improve efficiency by outsourcing various functions. As a matter of fact, when I worked for Dell Computers, they went through a stage where they actually outsourced the entire marketing department. They let go everyone except for 3 employees, and then hired an external company to do all of Dell's marketing activities. Since then, they changed strategically again and went and hired back a marketing department and got rid of that outsourcing company. But to that point, there are some organizations that work in such close proximity or such close tandem with their partners that you can't tell the difference between one employee and the other. In fact, even at Dell, there are people who were not Dell employees but were granted Dell employee badges because their organizations work that closely with Dell as a company. And then HR has to look at the traditional HR functions: training, development, evaluating employees, compensation, and have a good strategy in place to make sure the organization stays effective in those areas. The overall goal is to increase productivity and reduce labor costs. And this is a very strategic component for HR. Some ways that organizations are embracing change. If by looking at redefining how jobs are structured, very commonly now you'll see that there's organizational shifts to accommodate the various types of employees. You may have work shifts starting at different times. We have a shift that starts at 8 o'clock. We have a shift that starts at 10 o'clock or 12 o'clock, morning shift or afternoon shift. You have workforce availability. We have to look at the number of people that are available and when they can work and structure jobs around that. We also have to consider talent management. When you hear the term talent management, I want you to think of the organization's ability to manage the skills that are within the company and making sure they're in the right job. And then there's an increasing number of people that are in the contingent workforce. A lot of people are choosing to work for themselves, or you have other companies that can come and offer services to an organization for a cheaper amount. So HR is constantly looking at those things and seeing how it can increase productivity. Well, that wraps it up for this lecture. If you have any questions or comments, please send them in an email, or if we meet physically for class, bring them to class. Thank you, and I'll talk to you later.